Hello, wizards and muggles. Welcome back to our magical channel. Today we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating, dark and deeply moving stories in the Harry Potter universe, the complete history of the Deathly Hallows. Prepare yourselves for an epic journey that goes far beyond what you imagine. A saga that spans more than 1,000 years of magical history. From ancestral legends to the events that forever changed the destiny of the world we know and love. Before we begin this extraordinary adventure, if you're not yet part of our magical family, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know our wizards and muggles scattered around the world. The story I'll share today isn't just a legend told in storybooks. It's an epic saga of absolute power, inevitable death, love that transcends dimensions, and sacrifices that defined generations. From the skilled hands of the mysterious Peverell brothers to the final confrontation between Harry Potter and Voldemort, the Deathly Hallows are the golden thread that connects more than 1,000 years of magical history. A narrative that few know completely, but which shaped the destiny of us all. Our epic journey begins more than 1,000 years ago, in an era when magic still pulsed wild through the earth, and the boundaries between life and death were much more tenuous. It was an era of prodigies and terrors, where the impossible happened daily, and wizards shaped reality with powers that today we would consider divine. In this extraordinary time lived three brothers who would become legendary: Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus Peverell. But don't be mistaken, they weren't common wizards walking the dusty roads of medieval England. They were true archmages, masters of magical arts so profound and dangerous that today they would be considered not just impossible, but absolutely terrifying for any modern wizard. The legend we know, immortalized in The Tale of the Three Brothers by Beedle the Bard, transports us to a dark night where these three prodigies traveled along a road known for its tragedies. The path serpentined through cursed lands, where whispers of lost travelers echoed among ancient trees, and many who dared to pass never returned to their homes. When they reached the treacherous river, its black waters known for swallowing lives for centuries, the Peverells didn't hesitate. With enchantments that made nature itself bow to their will, they raised a magical bridge over the deadly waters. But in the middle of the crossing, when they already felt safe, an icy presence enveloped them. It was Death himself in person. Imagine, if you can, the most terrifying figure your minds can conceive. An entity wrapped in eternal shadows, with eyes that have seen the end of all things, and a voice that echoes like the last breath of those who depart forever. Death was furious. Those waters had been his harvesting tool for millennia, and the three brothers had just deprived him of 3 new souls. But Death was ancient and cunning. Instead of attacking directly, he feigned admiration for the brothers' exceptional skill. With a smile that froze the blood, he offered them each a gift as a reward for their intelligence. The three brothers, each with their own nature and desires, made choices that would echo through the centuries. Antioch, the eldest of the three, possessed a heart that pulsed with thirst for power and domination. He was a born duelist, known throughout the magical world not only for his incomparable skill, but for his arrogance that rivaled the ancient gods. His eyes gleamed with ambition when he saw the opportunity before him. "I want a wand more powerful than any other in existence," he declared without hesitation. "A wand that makes its bearer invincible in any duel, capable of defeating any opponent who dares oppose me." Death smiled sinisterly. He knew exactly what that gift would bring. From an ancestral elder branch that grew on the riverbank, he molded the Elder Wand with his own spectral hands. This wasn't a common wand like those we know in Ollivander's shops or anywhere else in the magical world. Made from sacred elderwood, a tree that, according to legends, only flowers where the blood of the righteous has been spilled, and with a core of thestral tail hair, creatures that can only be seen by those who have witnessed death up close. It was a wand born from the very essence of mortality. The powers of the Elder Wand defied the natural laws of magic in ways that even today scholars cannot fully explain. It could repair other wands considered irreparable. A feat that is normally impossible. It performed magic that would require dozens of experienced wizards working in unison. And in the right hands, legends whispered, it could even touch the veil between life and death in ways no wizard had ever dared dream. Antioch returned to his village completely intoxicated by the power he now possessed. The wand seemed to whisper in his mind, feeding his natural arrogance with promises of eternal glory. That very fateful night, he sought out a rival wizard with whom he had ancient, bloody disagreements, a man who had publicly humiliated Antioch years before. The duel was brutal, but frighteningly quick. The Elder Wand cut through the opponent's most elaborate defenses, like an incandescent blade through parchment. Antioch won with an ease that left him stunned, completely destroying his rival with a single devastating curse that left a smoking crater where once there had been a man. That night, while he slept heavily, an envious and desperately ambitious wizard silently infiltrated his room. With a poisoned blade, he cut Antioch's throat and stole the wand that would be his downfall. Thus, through his own arrogance, death took Antioch. Cadmus, the middle brother, possessed a completely different heart. Where Antioch sought power over others, Cadmus sought only to reunite with those he had lost. He had recently lost the woman he loved more than life itself, a young witch of indescribable beauty named Ilara, who died of a mysterious illness just 3 days before their wedding. Imagine the pain that gnawed at Cadmus day and night. He could hear her laughter echoing through the empty corridors of his house. He could smell her perfume on clothes she would never wear again. Each dawn was a new stab, reminding him that she wouldn't be there to share another day. Consumed by pain that seemed to tear his very soul, Cadmus addressed death with tears streaming down his face. Bring her back to me. Give me the power to reunite with those who have departed. I cannot live in this world without her. Death, with his cruel smile that had deceived countless souls through millennia, took a stone from the river's depths, a black stone like hopelessness that had been polished by the tears of 1,000 widowers. With magic older than the stars themselves, he transformed it into the resurrection stone, engraving on it a symbol that would become both sacred and cursed, a perfect circle within a triangle, cut by a vertical line. Cadmus ran home with his heart racing with hope and despair mixed together. Unable to wait even one more second, he turned the stone 3 times in his trembling hand, whispering Ilara's name like a prayer. And she appeared. She was there, yes, but not as Cadmus remembered. It was as if a thin and insurmountable film eternally separated her from the world of the living. Her eyes, which once shone with joy, now carried infinite sadness. Her skin, which once radiated warmth, now had the pallor of the moon on a winter night. When Cadmus tried to touch her, his hands passed through her like mist. When he spoke of his love, she only shook her head with an expression of deep pain. Ilara was suffering, torn by force from the eternal rest she deserved, forced to exist between 2 worlds without truly belonging to either. "Why did you bring me back?" she whispered with a voice that sounded like wind through dead leaves. "I was at peace, my love, I was at peace." Cadmus then realized the terrible truth that death had hidden. The dead should never return to the world of the living. They belonged to the beyond, and bringing them back was a cruel form of torture for both them and those who loved them. The resurrection stone didn't offer true reunion, only a cruel imitation that made the loss even more painful. Consumed by devastating guilt and absolute despair, unable to be truly with his beloved, but also unable to let her go again, Cadmus hanged himself in his own house that same night. using the rope he had planned to use to decorate the garden for the wedding that never happened. Thus, through love that became obsession, death took Cadmus. Ignotus, the youngest but by far the wisest of the three brothers, observed his brother's choices with growing unease. He possessed a sharp perception that allowed him to see through the masks people wore, and from the first moment he deeply distrusted Death's true intentions. When his turn came, Ignotus didn't ask for power over others or impossible attempts to reverse the natural. Instead, with the wisdom that comes from truly understanding the nature of things, he made an apparently simple but profoundly intelligent request. "I want something that allows me to leave this place without being followed, neither by you nor by anyone who wishes me harm." Death hesitated for the first time. This request was different, more prudent, harder to turn into a curse. Reluctant, but bound by his given word, he removed his own personal cloak, a mantle woven with the darkness of the void between stars, and handed it to Ignotus with visible resentment. The invisibility cloak wasn't like other magical cloaks that existed throughout the world. It was a truly impenetrable mantle which hid its user not only from common sight, but from detection spells, from ancestral magical creatures, and even from Death's own supernatural senses. It was invisibility in its purest and most absolute form. Ignotus lived a long, prosperous, and mainly happy life. He married a wonderful witch who loved his gentle and wise nature. He had children who grew up under his loving guidance, learning not only magic, but wisdom about when to use it and when to abstain. When he finally felt that his natural hour had come, not from illness or violence, but simply because he had lived a full life, he passed the sacred cloak to his eldest son with instructions about its responsible use. Only then, like an old friend meeting another after a long journey, he greeted Death as an equal and voluntarily departed with him to whatever existed beyond this life. Thus, through wisdom and humility, Ignotus not only cheated Death, he taught him about the value of a life well lived. When the three extraordinary brothers died, their impossible creations took completely different paths through the torrent of history. Each relic carried not only magical power, but also the essence and personality of its creator, destining them to influence the world in completely distinct ways. The Elder Wand began its bloody and relentless journey through the centuries, passing violently from murderous wizard to murderous wizard in an endless chain of death and betrayal. It was as if Antioch's ambition had been infused into the very wood, forcing it to always seek bearers who shared his thirst for power and domination. The resurrection stone mysteriously disappeared after Cadmus's tragic death, carrying with it the pain and despair that had consumed its creator. It would resurface centuries later, secretly transformed into a gaunt family ring, continuing to spread sadness and obsession wherever it went. The invisibility cloak, reflecting Ignotus's wisdom and benevolence, remained protected and honored in the Peveril family, being passed lovingly from generation to generation as a sacred inheritance. Not an object of power to be conquered, but a gift to be preserved and used responsibly. After violently stealing the wand from Antioch Peveril's still warm corpse, the unknown assassin quickly discovered he had obtained much more than he had bargained for. The wand wasn't just an object of power. It seemed to have developed a consciousness of its own, an insatiable thirst for conflict that attracted violence wherever it went. During the centuries that followed, a terrible and predictable pattern established itself. The wand's bearer would gain unimaginable power, but that same power would inevitably attract increasingly desperate and dangerous challenges. Within months, or at best a few years, the bearer would be defeated by someone even more ambitious, who in turn would suffer the same fate. The wand created a vicious cycle that fed on human nature itself. The more power it offered, the more envy and ambition it awakened in others. It was a curse disguised as a blessing, a gift that always demanded a terrible final price. One of the first bearers officially documented by historical records was an absolutely terrifying dark wizard known only as Loxias, who spread terror throughout magical Europe in the early 14th century. His story is told in whispers to this day, a cautionary tale about how absolute power can transform even a talented wizard into an unimaginable monster. Loxias wasn't evil by nature when young. Fragmentary records suggest he began as an idealistic wizard, someone who genuinely believed he could use superior power to create a better world. But the Elder Wand was like poison in his veins, gradually amplifying his worst impulses until his original compassion transformed into systematic cruelty. With the wand in his hands, Loxias methodically built an empire of terror that extended from the mountains of Scotland to the forests of Germany. He didn't just subjugate magical communities through fear, he completely reorganized them according to his distorted vision of perfection. Entire families disappeared during the night. Wizards who questioned his decisions were transformed into horrible examples for others. What made Loxias particularly terrifying wasn't just his cruelty, but his intelligence. He developed elaborate systems of control, spy networks that infiltrated all communities under his dominion. The Elder Wand allowed him to perform feats that seemed impossible. He could appear simultaneously in various places through magical projections, read minds at enormous distances, and create curses that persisted for generations. His bloody reign lasted almost a complete decade, a period that historians still study with horror and fascination. During this time, it's estimated that thousands of wizards lost their lives directly or indirectly because of his tyrannical policies. Loxias's end finally came through Arcus, a brave young wizard who had lost his entire family to Loxias's purges. Arcus dedicated years to meticulously planning his revenge, studying every aspect of Loxias's magic until he found a single vulnerability. The final battle was truly epic, a confrontation that completely destroyed an entire medieval castle and killed dozens of people in the process. Loxias fought with the fury of someone who had never faced real opposition, while Arcus fought with the silent desperation of one who had nothing left to lose. When the smoke finally cleared, Arcus emerged victorious, but victory came at a terrible price. The absurd amount of dark magic released during combat aged him physically several decades in a matter of minutes. His hair darkened and then whitened. His skin wrinkled like ancient parchment, and his eyes gained the haunted depth of someone who had seen too much suffering. Arcus, traumatized not only by the battle, but by intimate knowledge of what the wand had done to Loxias, courageously tried to break the cycle of violence. He genuinely believed he could use the wand for benevolent purposes, healing, protection, reconstruction of communities devastated by years of terror. But he quickly discovered that the Elder Wand actively resisted benevolent magic. It was as if it had been forged specifically to dominate, conquer, and destroy. Worse still, mere possession of the wand had marked Arcus as a target. During his troubled reign, the entire magical world entered what historians today call the period of silent wars, decades of bloody conflicts between different factions of dark wizards, all desperately trying to conquer the legendary wand. Arcus spent the last years of his life not governing or enjoying power, but constantly running. He developed justified paranoia, always looking nervously over his shoulders, always expecting the next assassin who would inevitably come. He slept with alarm spells around his bed, ate only food he prepared himself, and trusted very few people. Ironically, his death came not through an epic duel or magical battle, but from something much more mundane and terrible. In 1362, a particularly intelligent witch named Livius poisoned him during what he believed to be a peace negotiation. She had realized that the wand, however powerful, couldn't protect its bearer from all forms of death, only from magical ones. The centuries that followed saw the legendary wand pass through the hands of some of the darkest, cruelest, and genuinely disturbed wizards in all documented history. Each left their indelible mark on world magical history, and each contributed to the growing legend of curse that surrounded the wand. Godolo the Scholar was perhaps the most intellectual and systematically dangerous of all bearers. Unlike the tyrants who came before, Godolo wasn't interested in political power or territorial domination. He wanted knowledge, specifically knowledge about the true nature of magic that the wand made possible. During his time as bearer, Godolo conducted experiments that today would be considered not just illegal, but fundamentally immoral. He systematically tested the limits of the wand's power, using voluntary and involuntary prisoners as test subjects. His writings, preserved in his sinister grimoire, Secrets of the Darkest Arts, reveal a brilliant mind, but completely disconnected from human compassion. Godolo discovered that the wand could perform magic that would normally require dozens of experienced wizards working together. It could penetrate defenses considered absolutely impenetrable. More disturbing, he documented evidence that the wand possessed a rudimentary form of consciousness. It seemed to anticipate its bearer's desires and occasionally suggest actions that would amplify conflict and violence. Ironically, Godolo's obsession with understanding the wand led to his destruction. His own son, Hereward, grew up observing the horrible transformations that power had caused in his father. When Hereward reached adulthood, he made a terrible but understandable decision. He locked Godolo in his own secret laboratory and left him to die slowly of hunger and thirst. Hereward publicly claimed he was freeing the world from a dangerous monster and was probably being sincere. But the more complex truth was that he also wanted the wand for himself, believing he could resist the temptations that had corrupted his father. Hereward, the guilty, lasted only a few pathetic months as legitimate bearer. The devastating guilt of having murdered his own father, even for understandable reasons, consumed him completely. He made basic tactical mistakes, lost focus during duels, and was eventually defeated with humiliating ease by Barnabas Deverell, an experienced wizard who had patiently waited for his opportunity. Deverell was possibly the cruelest, most sadistic, and genuinely psychopathic of all Elder Wand bearers in all documented history. He affectionately called it the Death Stick, and developed an almost romantic relationship with the violence it made possible. During his reign of terror in the 17th century, Deverell personally murdered hundreds of people, not in fair battles or purposeful wars, but for pure sadistic pleasure. He developed execution techniques that were works of macabre art, transforming murder into theatrical performance. Deverell created completely revolutionary dueling techniques that specifically exploited the wand's unique powers. He could cast multiple killing curses simultaneously against various opponents, create magical shields that absorbed and redirected enemy spells back to their casters, and perform public executions that became legendary for their creative cruelty and sadistic originality. What made Deverell particularly terrifying was his cold and calculating intelligence. He didn't kill from anger or impulse. Each murder was carefully planned as a lesson or entertainment. He created a magical amphitheater where he forced other wizards to duel to the death for his amusement, transforming human tragedy into spectacle. His deserved end finally came in 1689, when a courageous group of aurors led by Egbert the Bold managed to corner him after months of meticulous planning. Egbert had lost his youngest son to one of Deverell's performances and dedicated his life to revenge. The final battle lasted 3 entire days, devastating an area of several miles around. Egbert didn't try to disarm him honorably. He had learned that honor had no place when it came to stopping a monster like Deverell. Instead, he used a tactic that would become famous. He attacked Deverell cowardly from behind, while he was distracted torturing an innocent victim. For endless centuries, the Elder Wand passed violently from hand to hand, always leaving a bloody trail of death and destruction. Each bearer added their own mark of horror to the growing legend, but all were fundamentally small in scale. Local tyrants, individual assassins, regional despots. But in the 20th century, the wand finally found its most dangerous, intelligent, and truly threatening bearer to all humanity, Gellert Grindelwald. Grindelwald wasn't just magically powerful, he possessed something much more dangerous than raw power: vision. He was brilliant, charismatic, deeply convinced of his beliefs, and possessed a clear and apparently logical ideology for the future of the entire magical and muggle world. When he skillfully stole the Elder Wand from the famous wandmaker Gregorovitch in 1899, it wasn't for personal power ambition or thirst for violence like his predecessors. Grindelwald had much bigger, more organized, and infinitely more dangerous plans for all humanity. He wanted to completely reshape the world order. With the Elder Wand finally in his talented hands, Grindelwald systematically built not just an empire, but an ideological revolution like the world had never seen. He wasn't a disorganized, sadistic killer like Deverell or a simple tyrant like Loxias. He was a brilliant revolutionary with an extremely dangerous but logically consistent philosophy. Grindelwald firmly believed that wizards should rule muggles, not out of cruelty or desire for domination, but for the greater good of all humanity. His logic was seductively simple. Wizards possessed power to solve all the world's problems: hunger, disease, war, poverty. It was morally wrong to allow muggles to continue suffering when wizards could create paradise on Earth. During decades of growing dominion, Grindelwald used the wand for conquests on a scale never seen before in history. He could perform magic that defied understanding, invoke devastating storms that destroyed entire cities, resurrect the dead as obedient soldiers in his ever-growing armies, and create magical defenses that entire armies of wizards couldn't even scratch. Even more dangerous, Grindelwald was a master of propaganda and psychological manipulation. He converted enemies into followers through demonstrations of his benevolent power. He healed incurable diseases to gain loyalty, resolved centuries-old conflicts with impressive demonstrations of magical justice, and gradually convinced entire communities that his vision was not only correct, but inevitable. What made Grindelwald even more dangerous was his deep personal connection with Albus Dumbledore. They had been not just childhood friends, but intellectual collaborators, and some whisper something even deeper. Together, they had developed the philosophy that Grindelwald would eventually take to the most terrible extremes. Dumbledore, tormented by guilt for having helped create the monster Grindelwald had become, initially refused to confront him directly. For years, he watched with growing horror while his former friend conquered entire countries, always hoping that Grindelwald would eventually realize the errors of his methods. Grindelwald's inevitable fall finally came in 1945, in a duel that scholars consider the greatest individual magical combat in modern history. It wasn't just a battle between two exceptionally powerful wizards. It was a confrontation between two fundamentally different philosophies about magic's role in the world. The final confrontation between Dumbledore and Grindelwald lasted several hours and literally destroyed half of a European city. Witnesses described magic being cast on scales that seemed to bend reality itself. The sky split with lightning of impossible colors. The earth trembled as if the world itself was in agony, and the very atmosphere seemed to scream with the power being released. Grindelwald fought with the Elder Wand as an extension of his own will, performing feats that no wizard before or after him managed to replicate. He literally rewrote local physics laws, created armies of shadow soldiers, and invoked magic that some believe was borrowed from dimensions beyond human comprehension. Dumbledore, in turn, fought without the world's most powerful wand, relying only on his own exceptional skill and something Grindelwald had lost along his journey. The ability to fight motivated by love and protection of innocence, not by power or ideology. In the end, Dumbledore prevailed, not because he was magically superior, but because his motivation was pure. He fought to protect, while Grindelwald, despite his noble rationalizations, fought to dominate. The difference, however subtle, was decisive. When Grindelwald finally fell, defeated and exhausted, legend says he looked into Dumbledore's eyes and whispered, "You were always the better of us two, Albus." It was the belated recognition of a man who had lost his humanity in pursuit of what he believed to be the greater good. After the tragic and premature death of Cadmus Peverell, the Resurrection Stone mysteriously disappeared into the mists of history, taking with it the dark secrets of its creation and the echoes of pain that had consumed its creator. Unlike the Elder Wand, which left an obvious and bloody trail of violence wherever it went, the stone was infinitely more subtle in its methods of destruction. The stone possessed a magnetic aura that irresistibly attracted people who had lost precious loved ones. It was as if it could sense the pain of grief across impossible distances, whispering seductive promises of reunion to broken hearts. Invariably, those who succumbed to its temptation were driven to complete madness, deep depression that consumed their souls, or to suicide as the only escape from the torture of having their loved ones so close, but eternally out of reach. For centuries, the stone passed through countless hands, always leaving emotional destruction in its wake. Entire families were consumed by obsession with the dead. Small empires crumbled when their leaders became obsessed with talking to deceased ancestors. The stone didn't need physical violence. It destroyed through cruel hope and the illusion of possibility. The stone eventually came into the hands of the Gaunt family, direct and